Welcome to the GWAPSWAP Ergoversary video. My name is Jesper Akergaard, and today we're going to go through the state of GWAPSWAP and what we've been doing in this bear market. So in review, what is GWAPSWAP? GWAPSWAP is an open source decentralized profit swapper for miners. We use smart contracts to interact with mining pools and decentralized exchanges to let miners get payout in the tokens that they want. For example, you can mine ERG and get paid in stablecoin, Sigma USD, and even DEXI Gold stablecoin when that stuff arrives on decentralized exchanges. So what have we been doing? We have released our white paper. We have released a new website. We have launched a public GWAPSWAP mainnet and testnet node. This is just for verification. We're not mining on it yet. We've redesigned the protocol architecture for GWAPSWAP v2. And we've integrated the new Spectrum v3 swap buy contract. And then our developer, Luca, has some things to add.
So for our current GWAPSWAP development is occurring in a custom library we're creating called GWAPSWAP lib, which will be open source and include different modules. We started this last year, but we developed a plugin for VS Code called ErgoScript language support for VS Code, and right now all it does is syntax highlighting, and we have 53 downloads so far. But hopefully I'd like to add more features in the future when I have time to make the experience of writing an ErgoScript just easier for developers. And we also created another library called Sigma Builders, which I made specifically to help me write and organize my off-chain code, but it's available for anybody to use. So our upcoming milestones, we need to implement our remaining GWAPSWAP contracts for the new architecture. We need to implement the transaction logic and core logic, so basically the Scala code for the library. And then we'll use this library or the GWAPSWAP module of the library to implement the actual CLI program that miners can download and actually run. And then on the side, trying to learn the Move language, because the Spectrum network will be based on a modified version of this for their smart contracts. And the idea is in the future, we'd like to make a Spectrum network version of GWAPSWAP so Ergo miners can have access to cross-chain liquidity, but native assets, not just wrapped assets, like through Rosen Bridge, for example. This is just a protocol diagram of the new architecture. So unlike the MVP that we created last year, everything was done in one transaction. But as we want to add new features, it's more difficult to do everything in one transaction because the smart contracts get too complicated. So we take advantage of the EUTXO model and parallelize each service into its own transaction. And we only need to worry about what I call in this diagram the guard contract for each service. And that contract only needs to worry about its specific transaction for that specific service. And as we want to add new features in the future, all we have to do is add a new transaction to this architecture with its own custom guard and transaction logic. And we only need to modify the proxy contract. So it simplifies the development for us and adds flexibility in the future, as well as for users as well, because they can just easily select which service they want to use while running the GWAPSWAP CLI. So the launch features using the new architecture will be GWAP swaps. So the main use case for GWAP swap is swapping your mined ERG for native assets on Ergo. And you can do this using mining portfolios. So you can swap the different assets at the same time in any ratio you want. So you could, I want 10% of Sigma USD, or so 10% of my payout in Sigma USD, and some other percent in some other token, and so on. And we also have GWAP Drop, which is you can distribute your mined ERG to any public key address. So it's like a kind of like a donation or an airdrop, but like built into GWAPSWAP. And these are all things you can select in the config file of the program. And you could do both at the same time. So you could say you could do 50% of your payout in Guap swaps, and then allocate that 50% in whatever percentage you want, depending on the assets you want, and then the remaining 50% you could allocate whatever percentage you want, or whatever ratio you want to whoever you want to donate your ERG to. So like I mentioned before, some advantages of the new architecture is we can easily add new features in the future. Each one is independent from the other, so it makes writing contracts a lot easier and more simpler. We can have a separate fee structure for each service. And one cool feature we want to add to the architecture is FIMO, so Fair Initial Mining Offerings, which is a way to launch a project token, but that can only be received via mining. And we can directly integrate this into the new architecture in the GuapSwap CLI. And just by having we can write custom FIMO contracts for projects that want to launch this way, and miners could select this feature and invest in any projects that they want, like if assuming they're launching this way, and that would have its own service fee as well. So it just adds to the flexibility enabled by the architecture. And like just as an example of how you could use this, you could interact with all the services all at once. So you could swap some ERG, send some ERG, and invest in projects all at the same time. So some future products we'd like to have. So like I mentioned before, the FIMO functionality for investing in new projects, Oasis, which is to enable miners to take advantage of Babel fees. So they could receive fee revenue from that. Pay, which would be a wallet integration application, so users could pay using any native Ergo token they want. So it's unlike Babel fees, which is just lets you pay for the transaction fee in any token you want, you could literally pay for something in any token you want. So if someone was requesting to USD, you could pay them ErgoPad, and under the hood it would use the GuapSwap logic we developed to do the swap for you, and the user would receive Sigma USD, but on your end all you had to do was provide the ErgoPad. And we'd also like to make a GUI so you could interact with other GuapSwap products just from your desktop in a visual way, instead of from a config file on a command line. And one feature from the library that we'd like to add a module is the DApp plugin system. So it's like a modular transaction library and built into GuapSwap lib, so other projects can use those custom transactions in their projects directly, and there would be a fee built into those transactions. So every time someone uses the transaction from the library, a fee would go to us. And that's the cool thing about writing blockchain libraries, is you can actually since it's basically a library of transactions, you could integrate a custom fee in it under the hood. And lastly, we'd like to have a Spectrum network version of GuapSwap so miners can have access to cross-chain liquidity. You can check out our email. We have a link tree, so everything is on there. Links to Discord, Reddit, and so on. Our Twitter is at GuapSwapErgo. Our website at guapswap.org. And our GitHub is just github.com/GuapSwap. And thanks for listening.